The 20-year-old disappeared after a date in the early morning hours of December 18th.
There's no clear indication of why she left the apartment again after the date. There was no obvious signs of anything that occurred at the apartment.
Heather Elvis's family and friends mounting a search across several counties again this morning. Teams of volunteers fanning across South Carolina in the bitter cold, searching by boat, by ATV, on foot and horseback.
Heather worked for us for over a year, and her name, we still keep her name on the schedule, because, until there's peace for everyone, her family, the community, our work family, we're keeping her name there.
If Heather's watching this, or anyone responsible is watching it, the message is the same. We miss you. We want you back home. We don't understand. Don't want to understand. There's nothing to forgive. There's no laws broken. Heather, if you see this and you can come home, or at least call. We don't understand.
3:37 in the morning. The phone of 20-year-old Heather Elvis suddenly pings near a remote boat ramp on the Waccamaw River. The place is called Peachtree Landing. It's the end of a long, lonely road, almost no people around. Quiet, dark. About a minute later, her phone tries to call the same number 3 times in a row. No answer. At 3:41, there's another call. Still no answer. Then, at 3:42, Heather's phone suddenly shuts off. Around that same moment, surveillance cameras capture a dark Ford F-150 turning onto the road that leads to Peachtree Landing. Behind the wheel is the man Heather had already been trying to break things off with. Sidney Moorer, a married father of 3. About 10 minutes later, that same pickup truck leaves the area. A few hours later, police will find Heather's car abandoned near the river. The doors are locked, but inside, there's no phone, no purse, no keys. And just like that, Heather Elvis disappears without a trace. Just a few hours before that, Heather had been crying on the phone with her friend. She said only one thing. Sidney had contacted her again. He told her he had left his wife. He said he wanted to see her. Heather agreed to talk. That was the last night anyone ever heard her voice. And the truth is, all of this started long before that dark road. It began with a random meeting at a restaurant in Myrtle Beach, with a relationship that, started out like a simple romance, and very quickly turned into something far more dangerous. All right, friends, I'm going to pause for just a minute. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from. So, I'd love to ask you something real quick. Tell me what city you're watching this video from and what time it is for you right now. Thanks for taking a moment to do that. Go ahead and drop it in the comments. And now, let's keep going. In the scenic Horry County, South Carolina, a lot of people see it as the perfect place to live. The area is famous for its many beaches, and one of the most popular and beautiful spots is Myrtle Beach. The landscape around here is pretty diverse. 2 thick green forests, wide flowing rivers, and lively little towns where people are friendly and close-knit. 20-year-old Heather Elvis was the oldest daughter of South Carolina natives Terry and Debbie Elvis. She was incredibly close with her parents and with her younger sister. Later on, her father would describe their relationship like this. "We've always been a really close family, the kind where everyone does everything they possibly can for each other." Heather had an especially close bond with her dad. They texted each other every single day. Heather had always been very independent. When she graduated from James High School in 2011 and decided she wanted to move out of the family home to live in an apartment with her best friend, Brianna Worrell. Her parents, Terry and Debbie, fully supported the decision. At 20 years old, Heather worked hard as a waitress at a Scottish-themed restaurant called the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach. At the same time, she was taking cosmetology classes, working toward her longtime dream of becoming a professional makeup artist. Her younger sister Morgan later remembered Heather's dreams like this.
She absolutely loved makeup. She wanted to be in front of the camera. And when it came to dreams, she really didn't believe in limits.
Besides her creativity and ambition, Heather was also incredibly popular and well-liked around town. People were drawn to her warm, carefree, and positive personality. One of her friends once said, "When people talk about Heather, they smile, because she was just full of life and personality." Another person who knew her remembered her this way. "I describe Heather as someone really open, free-spirited, someone who truly loved life. She always wanted to live it to the fullest." By the beginning of the summer in 2013, Heather had already been living in an apartment in Myrtle Beach with her best friend Brianna for about a year. Her classes were going well, and overall, life seemed to be falling into place. But everything changed after a chance meeting at the Tilted Kilt restaurant. A meeting that quietly set off a chain of events that would eventually end in tragedy. On a warm day in June, Heather was working the daytime shift at the busy restaurant. Like always, she was taking orders, clearing tables, and chatting with customers. At one point, as she was carrying trays back to the kitchen, Heather accidentally bumped into Sidney Moorer, a 37-year-old father of 3. He was a local technician who ran a small business repairing broken kitchen appliances around the Myrtle Beach area. They started talking, and Heather was immediately drawn to him. Later, on her account called Moonchild Heather, she hinted at a new crush and wrote something like this:
"I kinda like men who are older than me."
By the end of July, Heather had posted several pretty bold messages on social media. They were directed at what she called, "that guy who fixes things at my job." She would also often point Sidney Moorer out to her friends and coworkers and say, "That's the guy I was telling you about." Sidney seemed to enjoy the attention Heather was giving him, and he started showing up at the restaurant more often just to talk with her. People at work frequently saw them together in the kitchen, laughing and joking around whenever Sidney came in to repair equipment. By July, their relationship may have already moved from an innocent crush to something much more serious. That became even more clear when Heather posted 2 tweets just 1 minute apart, hinting that there might be a romantic relationship between her and Sidney.
Baby did a bad thing. And then, just a minute later, she added, "And I may have gone too far, but just watch how much further I'm willing to go."
By that time, most of Heather's coworkers already knew about the feelings the 20-year-old had for Sidney, and rumors about their relationship had started spreading among the staff. Later, one of Heather's coworkers would remember it like this:
"We all knew about it because people would often make fun of Heather for it. I mean, he was a married man. A lot of people teased her about it, and some of the girls we worked with even called her some pretty nasty names."
One day, 2 employees at the restaurant decided to play a prank. They called the Tilted Kilt and pretended to be Tammy Sidney's wife. By August, the rumors about Heather and Sidney seemed to be getting confirmed. Sidney started showing up around the Tilted Kilt more and more often, even on his days off. Sometimes he brought Heather coffee and bagels. Other times he would just sit in his car near the back entrance of the restaurant and wait for her. Heather would finish her shift, and by that point the 2 of them had begun speaking much more openly with friends about their relationship. Sidney even told some people he was thinking about hiring Heather as a full-time nanny for his kids if he and his wife ever moved to Florida. Heather told her friends the same thing that Sidney had asked her to become a nanny for his children. But honestly, a lot of people thought that sounded strange, because at the same time, it seemed pretty clear that the 2 of them were also involved romantically. Heather and Sidney were constantly in touch through their phones. They would often drive their separate cars out to remote, isolated places just to meet each other there. For Heather, the whole situation became an emotional roller coaster. Sidney would often tell her he was unhappy in his marriage and that he planned to leave his wife. But that never actually happened. Heather's friends warned her more than once that an older married man might simply be leading her on. By the middle of September that year, all the secrecy and the constant hidden meetings had started to really wear Heather down. On September 21st, it's believed she tried to end the relationship, or at least finally bring some kind of closure to it. People think that because of a message she posted on Twitter.
"Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love." Yeah, that didn't end well.
The situation became even more toxic when Sidney's wife, 34-year-old Tammy, eventually found out about the relationship and called Heather to confront her. According to Heather's roommate, Brianna, who was there during the phone call, Tammy humiliated Heather and told her that Sidney had only been using her for casual, intimate meetups. The angry wife then forced her husband to get on the phone and speak with Heather. Later, Brianna told investigators that Sidney was yelling into the phone, saying something like this: "You meant nothing to me. You were just someone who spread her legs." Brianna later added, "They literally destroyed Heather as a person. They completely devalued her and made her feel absolutely terrible. The marriage between Tammy and Sydney Moore, from the outside, seemed extremely toxic. Later, prosecutor Chris Helms told reporters, Tammy Moore was definitely the dominant one in that marriage. She told Sydney where to work, when to work, and what to do. If I had to describe Sydney in that relationship, I'd say he was completely submissive. Chris Helms also said that Tammy was furious about the affair and had no intention of simply letting her husband's relationship with the young woman fade away. She wanted to ruin Heather's life. Around that same time, Tammy reportedly even started handcuffing her husband to the bed at night so he couldn't leave while she was asleep. She also changed the password on his phone to a combination only she knew and forced him to get a tattoo of her name on his lower stomach, just above his groin. Sydney agreed to all of these extreme demands in the hope of saving his marriage and keeping his family together. But according to Brianna, Tammy's attacks didn't stop with that phone call. If anything, they turned into a full-blown campaign of harassment. Tammy even began repeatedly calling Heather's workplace, trying to get her fired.
Brianna later remembered it this way. Tammy was relentless.
She was calling from Sydney's phone. She even sent photos of herself and Sydney in intimate moments, along with videos of the two of them together. At one point, Heather sent Sydney a message, basically begging him to make his wife stop the harassment. She wrote something like this.
Today I lost work hours because they sent me home after she kept calling nonstop.
Heartbroken and deeply shaken by the way the man she had fallen for treated her, and honestly scared by the constant attacks and harassment from his wife, Heather tried to pull her life back together. She started focusing on herself again. She even began going back to church with her best friend Brianna. But in early November, Tammy sent Heather even more aggressive and threatening messages.
You can tell me where you are right now, or I'll find out another way. And trust me, that way won't end well for you. I'm giving you one last chance to answer before we meet face to face. Just W.
In another message, she wrote,
I've been watching Sydney since January 2012. You better call me and talk to me. Save yourself. Hey, sweetheart, are you ready to meet the wife?
By that point, Heather was emotionally and physically exhausted from everything that had been happening. So she simply replied,
I think you're getting a little too fixated on me. I'm really not someone you need to worry about anymore.
Heather couldn't understand why Tammy simply wouldn't leave her alone. Her relationship with Sydney was already over, and she just wanted to forget the whole thing and move on with her life. By the end of November, a little more than 2 weeks after Tammy's last threatening messages, things finally started to look a bit more positive for Heather. Sydney and Tammy, along with their 3 children, left on a 3-week road trip across California in their newly purchased Ford F-150. While the Moorer family was away, Heather felt like she could finally relax a little and breathe again. At least for a while, she got a break from Tammy's constant harassment. But that wasn't the only good news in Heather's life. She had managed to land her dream job at a beauty salon as a makeup artist, and she was supposed to start working there shortly before Christmas. Heather was incredibly happy about it. She couldn't stop telling her friends and family how excited she was. However, there was also something weighing heavily on her mind, something that could make the whole situation with the Moorers much worse. At the beginning of November, Heather and some of her co-workers at the Tilted Kilt started noticing that the 20-year-old had gained a noticeable amount of weight in a very short time. Heather began to seriously worry that she might be pregnant with Sydney's child. Deeply anxious and scared, she decided to take a pregnancy test. She actually took the test right there at the restaurant, with the help of her manager, Jessica Cook. Later, Jessica told police that Heather was extremely afraid of Tammy Moorer. But the pregnancy test came back with an error, and Heather never found out whether she was pregnant with Sydney's child or not. Later, Heather's best friend said something about that moment.
Heather took a pregnancy test right there at work. I think it was sometime in early November. And at that point, she wasn't involved with anyone else. Sydney was the only person she had been intimate with.
Despite all the worries weighing on her, by the winter of 2013, Heather, always the optimist, decided it was time to move forward and start a new chapter in her life. She hoped to find a new relationship, something happier and healthier. So she agreed to go on a first date with a man she hadn't been talking to for very long, but who already gave her a really good feeling. His name was Steve Girardi. On the evening of December 17th, Heather and Steve met up around 1 in the afternoon and decided to drive around Myrtle Beach to check out the Christmas lights around the city. After a while, They pulled into a nearby parking lot where Steve started teaching Heather how to drive a car with a manual transmission. Excited, Heather sent a text message to her dad and to Brianna, along with a smiling photo. It said, "I just learned how to drive stick. Like, I'm basically a pro now." Later, Steve said the two of them had agreed to see each other again for a second date. After that, he drove Heather back to her apartment in Carolina Forest at around 1:15 in the morning. Then, around 1:45 a.m., Heather's best friend Brianna received a disturbing phone call from her. Heather was hysterical. She was crying.
Sydney called me. My heart just dropped because I thought, haven't we already been through all of this? I asked her, why did you even answer the phone? And she said, because it wasn't his number.
Heather explained that Sydney had told her he had left his wife, that he was sorry for everything, and that he wanted to see her and be with her. Brianna immediately got upset and told her, "Don't do this. You are finally moving on. You're happy again. You're finally starting to feel like yourself again. Just sleep on it tonight, okay? And in the morning, we'll talk everything through." After that, the two friends said goodnight and hung up. The next day, December 19th, local police were called to check on a suspicious abandoned vehicle, a green Dodge Intrepid that had been parked awkwardly in a secluded area near the river called Peachtree Landing. The spot sits about 8 miles from Myrtle Beach, along the Waccamaw River. That stretch of shoreline is used as a small boat launch and lies at the very end of a long, lonely road where almost no traffic passes. The car was locked, but officers ran the license plate through their registration system. A name quickly appeared in the database. The green Dodge Intrepid was registered to Terry Elvis, Heather's father. At that moment, Terry Elvis was relaxing at home, sitting on the couch in his living room and watching television when police knocked on his door to tell him about the Dodge Intrepid that had been found. Confused and unable to reach his daughter by phone, he agreed to ride with the officers to Peachtree Landing to figure out what was going on. When Terry saw Heather's car parked in such a strange and remote place, he was shocked, but at first he wasn't overly worried. He opened the vehicle using the spare key he had with him and allowed the officers to take a look inside. Later, he remembered that moment like this. "I thought maybe the car had been stolen just because of the way it was parked. Like, maybe someone took it and then just dumped it there. Honestly, it didn't even hit me at first. Like, wait, where's Heather?" That thought didn't really cross my mind until the officer started going through the things inside the car. When police couldn't find Heather's purse, her keys, or her cell phone inside the Dodge Intrepid, her father started to become seriously worried. He tried calling her cell phone again, but it was turned off. Then he drove to the Tilted Kilt, hoping maybe she was there. But the restaurant staff told him Heather wasn't there, and she wasn't even scheduled to work until the next day. That was the moment Terry realized something was wrong. "This is completely unlike Heather," he said. "She has never done anything like this before." Something happened. At first, the Horry County Police Department did not treat Peachtree Landing and the car as a crime scene. There was no broken glass, no signs of a struggle, and no blood. However, they immediately opened a missing person case. Police officers, along with volunteers, began searching the areas around Peachtree Landing, while divers examined the waters of the Waccamaw River.
Heather Elvis's family and friends mounting a search across several counties again this morning. Teams of volunteers fanning across South Carolina in the bitter cold, searching by boat, by ATV, on foot and horseback.
No amount of attention, no amount of law enforcement, no amount of work, effort that I do or anybody does is ever going to be enough until she's back home again.
The 20-year-old disappeared after a date in the early morning hours of December 18th.
There's no clear indication of why she left the apartment again after the date. There was no obvious signs of anything that occurred at the apartment.
Earlier that night, her date was teaching her how to drive a stick shift in this small parking lot. She called a friend afterwards to say how well the date went. Her father says she sent him a text. It was this picture of her driving the car that night.
For years, I tried to teach her how to drive one, and I just didn't have the patience to do it. And now she was doing it on her own. I'm very proud of it.
The next day, when she failed to show up for work, police found her abandoned car at a boat landing not far from her parents' home.
I think that everybody should take a moment to hold their family and tell them that they love them, because sometimes it's not enough to just assume that they know.
just waiting for the right person to come forward and say, I saw something, or I heard something, or I know something, or I did something.
They've kept the Christmas tree up, and her presents are waiting for her.
Later, human remains were discovered not far from Peachtree Landing. But after further analysis, investigators determined that the bones actually belonged to a man. Because there was almost no physical evidence, detectives began carefully tracing Heather's movements on December 17th and December 18th. Steve Girardi, the man Heather had gone on a date with the night she was last seen, was brought in for questioning. He was interviewed by investigators, but very quickly they cleared him of any suspicion and let him go.
Well, Tim, you mentioned community, and one small community of Heather's is where she worked, a place where coworkers say they still feel the pain of not having Heather by their side.
Heather worked for us for over a year, and her name, we still keep her name on the schedule, because, she, until there's peace for everyone, her family, the community, our work family, we're keeping her name there.
Heather's family and friends were devastated by what had happened. They began posting heartfelt and emotional messages online, begging anyone with information to come forward. They even offered reward money to help find answers. But almost immediately after Heather disappeared, Tammy Mora returned to social media and continued what many saw as her campaign of hatred. On Facebook, she posted a long, angry message that began like this.
While Sydney was cheating on me back in September and October with some mentally unstable girl who later went missing on December 20th.
On December 20th, after Heather's roommate Brianna and several employees from the Tilted Kilt told police about the intense relationship between Sydney and Heather, detectives brought Sydney Moore in for questioning. Right from the beginning, he acted distant and evasive. Sydney denied being anywhere near Peachtree Landing on the night of December 17th or the early morning of December 18th. He insisted he hadn't had any contact with Heather at all. At the same time, he made a very strange claim. He said that around that time, he had been driving around with his wife Tammy in his pickup truck, having sex in public places. According to him, they even recorded it on their phones. Experienced detectives had a strong feeling he was lying. They just needed proof. When investigators began analyzing Heather's call history and her phone records, they discovered the first major clues in the case. Little by little, they started reconstructing Heather's final known movements and the role Sydney may have played in them. In the early morning hours of December 18th, Heather received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. She didn't know the number because the call had been made from a public payphone. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes. After it ended, Heather began repeatedly trying to call that number back in a panic. Starting around 1:35 in the morning, Heather dialed that same payphone number 9 different times. Later, one of the investigators explained it this way. The only reason she would call a number 9 times a number she had never seen before is because she was trying to reach the person who had just called her. She clearly wanted to talk to them again. Using Heather's phone records, investigators traced that number back to a payphone located near a gas station in Myrtle Beach. Surveillance cameras captured someone using that payphone at the exact moment the call was made to Heather's cell phone. When detectives asked Sydney whether he had been the one who made the call, he initially denied it.
Did you try calling her? Just a minute? A second? You sure? Good. Okay, how about we start again?
I did. I called her.
Okay, what did you say?
I asked her to please leave me alone.
Tammy Moorer was also brought in for questioning. During the interview, she talked about her marriage and firmly denied having any involvement in Heather's disappearance.
You guys don't understand. I had boyfriends. We had an open marriage. That's okay. I could care less if we had sex with 100 people. Okay. All right. I mean, that doesn't really, it doesn't bother me. Yeah. So, I mean, this girl, I can tell you just by, as an outsider looking at the Twitter, which I didn't know existed until all this went down, she's not right. She's not normal. I was 20. I partied with bands constantly. I wasn't that kind of girl. And believe me, I had the friends to make me that kind of girl, and I didn't do it.
After that, investigators decided to follow their suspicions and review every available surveillance camera in the area. Very quickly, they came across even more incriminating evidence. Shortly before that phone call was made, Sydney appeared on surveillance footage again, this time while buying a pregnancy test at a local Walmart. When detectives asked him whether the test had been for Heather, he denied it. Instead, he claimed he had bought it for his wife. Even more serious evidence came from surveillance cameras placed along the remote road that leads to Peachtree Landing. A dark Ford F-150 pickup, matching the description of Sydney's truck, was captured on camera, driving toward the area where Heather's car was later found at 3:36 in the morning. The same truck was recorded again, leaving the area at 3:46 a.m. Later, experts testified that the vehicle in the footage was 100% identical to Sydney's pickup. That meant Sydney had been the last person to speak with Heather, and according to investigators, he was also likely the last person to see her near Peachtree Landing. Using data from her phone, detectives were able to reconstruct the timeline of the final movements of Heather's mobile device. At 2:30 a.m., Heather's phone called the same payphone number again, the one Sydney had used earlier. There was no answer. After that, the phone moved toward Longbeard's Bar and Grill in Carolina Forest, not far from Heather's apartment. It stayed there for about 15 minutes. Then the signal moved to a location called Augusta Plantation Drive. After that, the phone returned to Longbeard's Bar and Grill and stayed there for another 15 minutes. From there, a call was placed to Sydney's phone, but he didn't answer. The phone then returned to Heather's apartment, where it remained for about 5 minutes. At 3:25 a.m., another call was made to Sydney's phone. This time he answered, and the conversation lasted about 4 minutes. At 3:37 a.m., Heather's phone moved to Peachtree Landing. About a minute later, 3 calls were placed to Sydney, but none of them were answered. At 3:41 a.m., there was one more attempt to reach him, again with no response. At 3:42 a.m., Heather's phone was likely turned off. These location records matched perfectly with the surveillance footage showing Sydney's pickup truck heading toward Peachtree Landing, which became extremely powerful evidence. Even more troubling details emerged after investigators obtained a search warrant for the Moorer family home. It turned out that on December 20th, the couple had suspiciously gotten rid of their home surveillance system and then, on December 21st, installed a brand new one. Since the old system could not be found, investigators seized the new one. The recordings from it showed Sydney and Tammy Moorer carefully washing the passenger side of their pickup truck and then burning the rags they had used to clean the vehicle. This happened on the same day they installed the new surveillance cameras around their house.
Prayer vigil for Heather Elvis. It was held last night at Peachtree Boat Landing. Her car was found abandoned there in December 2013. Her family continues to ask anyone with information to come forward.
We just have a feeling that there's people out there that know something that haven't come forward yet. And we're just hoping that no matter how little they think it is or how much trouble they think they might get into or what people might think of them, that all of those things, they'll overcome that and just go ahead and come and tell what they know.
The Elvis family plans to hold a fundraiser next week to rebuild a community garden at the landing. They will spread rocks sold during that fundraiser in the garden on Heather's birthday, which is June 30th. Proceeds will go to the Q Center for Missing Persons.
Finally, after several months, in February 2014, police were able to announce a major breakthrough in the case the news so many people had been waiting for. For a lot of people, it wasn't exactly a surprise when Sydney Moorer and Tammy Moorer were arrested in connection with Heather Elvis's disappearance. Soon after that, both of them were charged with kidnapping, and even though Heather's body had still not been found, they were also charged with murder. But the biggest problem remained. Heather still needed to be found, and the Moorers weren't saying a word.
This morning, Sydney and Tammy Moorer are behind bars in connection with the disappearance of 20-year-old Heather Elvis.
I wanted to feel happy about it, but there's no joy in it. Heather's still not home.
And for over 2 months, frustratingly slow progress until Friday's arrest, where police also raided the couple's home.
Anything that we release at this point, it could do a lot more harm than it could do good.
The breakthrough in the case coming from a discovery made by Elvis's father. He says he looked up her cell phone records.
There were a lot of calls to one particular number in the last hours before the phone stopped working.
That number, the parents telling ABC News, belonged to 38-year-old Sydney Moorer. Police say he and Elvis may have had a romantic relationship.
While the Moorer couple remained in custody, police continued gathering evidence. Despite all the suspicions surrounding them, investigators still did not have enough proof to support the murder charges. As a result, the murder charges against Sydney and Tammy were eventually dropped, though the kidnapping charges remained. Debbie Elvis later said she was deeply disappointed that the murder charges had been dismissed. But at the same time, she also felt a certain sense of relief, because it meant she would not have to sit through a trial and hear endless speculation about what might have happened to her daughter. The family also hoped that once the murder charges were dropped, people might be more willing to come forward and talk. After that, the couple was able to post bail and return home while they waited for the trial on the kidnapping charges. Even though they were not supposed to discuss the case publicly, they continued using social media activna, insisting on their innocence and claiming they had been set up. Sydney Moore even gave an emotional television interview.
Moore says he's frustrated he can't talk about it. He did talk about how it's hurting his family.
It's all a game. Everything's a game, and it's not a game. It never has been a game from the very beginning. The meanness that I've seen come out of people, it amazes me. How you can be so mean to someone you know nothing about a subject you know nothing about something that we did not do.
Since being charged, Sydney Moore says he's lost nearly everything he's worked for in his life and can't get a job while the case goes through the legal system. Despite the costs, Moore says he won't stop fighting the charges.
Because if I confess to something I didn't do, then there's a murderer or a kidnapper or whatever running around somewhere in this community. And no one even knows. That's the scary part.
After violating a court order that prohibited him from making public comments about the case, Sydney ended up in even more trouble. He was eventually jailed for 5 months for contempt of court. Tammy, meanwhile, publicly claimed, "I feel like this town is ready to crucify me because of all the lies that are being spread." Months passed, and then years. In 2017, Sydney Moore was found guilty of obstructing justice and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After that, it was finally time for the trial over the kidnapping of Heather Elvis. The case attracted huge media attention and intense public interest. By that point, it had already been 6 years since Heather was last seen alive. After numerous testimonies, mountains of evidence, and many long hours inside the courtroom, the case finally reached a verdict in 2019.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Tammy Kaysen Moore, guilty of kidnapping.
Sydney Moore will spend 30 years in prison now for kidnapping and conspiracy in the case. The jury handed down that guilty verdict on Wednesday after less than 2 hours of deliberation.
I feel like I'm begging for my life for something that I didn't do, that I didn't have anything to do with.
Moore was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison for each charge. 2 sentences she'll serve at the same time.
Justice, it seemed, was finally served when Tammy and Sydney Moore were found guilty of kidnapping Heather Elvis and sentenced to 30 years in prison. For many people, that decision felt like an important step forward in a case that had kept both Heather's family and the entire local community on edge for years. After long court hearings, numerous testimonies, and careful analysis of the evidence, the verdict was finally announced. Inside the courtroom, there was this heavy silence filled with emotion, a mix of relief and deep sadness. For Heather's loved ones, it was a moment when it felt like the justice system had at least partially done its job. But even that verdict didn't bring real closure. The most painful questions still had no answers. Where is Heather? What exactly happened that night? And will her body ever be found? The verdict was an important legal outcome, but for the family, it didn't bring peace. Without answers, the pain remained just as sharp. Despite the court's decision, Sydney Moore continued to insist on his innocence. During the trial, he repeatedly stated that he had nothing to do with Heather's disappearance. His position didn't change even when the court found him guilty. When he was finally given the chance to speak in court, the atmosphere in the room grew even more tense. Everyone was waiting to hear if he would finally say something, anything that might help explain what happened to the young woman. But the answers the Elvis family had been hoping for never came. In court, Sydney said he could not give Heather's family any answers. And for them, those words were especially painful, because answers were exactly what they had been searching for all those years. And even after the verdict, which officially closed the legal case, the central mystery of what truly happened to Heather remained unsolved. If I could give them an answer, I would. I have kids of my own. I understand their pain, but there's nothing I can tell them.
We get back in the back room,
And Terry put his hands on my shoulders and he said, "Now what?" And I said, "Exactly. Because this is over. But we still haven't found Heather." And it's like I was telling the judge, there has to be something more. There has to be something more that we could hold over their head to make them talk. There's got to be some kind of an incentive. It was so hard to walk out of the courtroom knowing that that might be the last time we get to do anything in that way.
As of the moment this story is being told, Heather Elvis's body has still never been found. A lot of time has passed, but the case remains an open wound for her family. The uncertainty that has stretched on for years turns every single day into a heavy emotional struggle. For the people who loved Heather, it means living with a question that no one can answer. Where is she? What really happened to her? And why is the truth still hidden? That uncertainty makes the pain even sharper, because without answers, it's almost impossible to find closure or any real peace. To make sure people never forget Heather, and to keep attention on her case, and on the many other people who have disappeared, the Elvis family follows a tradition every year on June 30th, Heather's birthday. On that day, they go around the city putting up flyers for missing persons. It has become a kind of ritual of remembrance. They walk through familiar streets, stopping near stores, bus stops, and public places. On walls and bulletin boards appear the photographs of people who one day simply vanished, leaving behind only memories and countless questions. For the Elvis family, these flyers are not just pieces of paper. They are a reminder to the city and to everyone around them that behind every photograph is a real life, a real family, and people who are still waiting. They haven't lost hope that one day someone will speak up and that the truth about what happened to Heather will finally come out. The family believes that somewhere out there is a person who knows more than they have ever said. Maybe someone witnessed something. Maybe someone overheard a conversation or noticed something important. And that's why they keep talking about the case. They keep reminding people, because they believe even one detail, one confession, or one phone call could change everything. Debbie Elvis says that persistence is the most important thing, and she will never stop searching for answers, not only for her daughter, but also for other families living through the same nightmare. For her, it has become a personal mission. She knows exactly what it feels like to wake up every day carrying both loss and hope, at the same time the hope that the truth will eventually come out. Debbie often says that in situations like this, the most important thing is not to let silence swallow the story of the missing person. As long as people remember, as long as they keep talking about it, the case stays alive. "I know this pain all too well," she said, "and I want to use my energy to make sure that people going through this never feel alone." Her words sound calm, but behind them are years of struggle, waiting, and hope. Debbie knows how easily families of missing people can end up completely isolated, as the world slowly moves on while, for them, time almost feels frozen. When she talks about the pain of not knowing where Heather is, she describes it like this.
As a mother, you carried that child inside you. You held them in your arms, you put bandages on their little cuts, and now all you want is to hold your child again. She continued, "You keep thinking about everything you could have done differently, something you could have said, something you could have changed." Then she added quietly, "For our family and for any family that has a loved one who's missing, it's just horrible not knowing. Not being able to take care of your child in any way." And finally she said, "They call it closure. I hate that word, but that's exactly what we're missing."
Heather's father, Terry, still holds on to the hope that one day she will be found. He once said, "I still catch myself hoping that one day I'll walk up to the door and she'll come into the house." Do I really believe that's going to happen? Deep down, no. But I'm never going to give up.